gospel according to Jesus is a little different to the gospel according to me. The gospel according to me tells of a God who is generally far off, but when he does involve himself, it mainly concerns me, my loved ones, and the success of Australian sports teams. Therefore, when Christ announces his news for the world, I am constantly taken off guard. In Matthew chapter 25, Jesus tells the parable of the sheep and the goats. It speaks of the end of history as we know it. Let me read from verse 31 of Matthew 25. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the peoples one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? And when did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did for the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." They also will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you?" He will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. So here is this momentous and eternal divide, this divide between the sheep and the goats. When Jesus returns, there will be those on his right who are sheep. They are blessed by his Father, and they are called righteous. Then there are those on his left who are the goats. They are cursed, and they will share in the devil's fate. The sheep will inherit eternal life. The goats will go to eternal punishment. And there is no third category. This is not a menagerie. It's not the sheep and the goats and the cows and the chickens and, there is one judge, and there are two kinds of people. There is Jesus, there are the sheep, and there are the goats. And all humanity will find themselves either as a sheep or a goat. The fates of these two groups are eternal, and on that day, irrevocable. This is the news that Jesus announces, and it wakes us up to eternal realities. We spend our time ruminating over other divisions that are far less important, things like right-wing or left-wing politics, or public or private education, iPhone or Android. But this is the division of eternal significance: sheep or goats. Which are we? Well, let's first notice the asymmetry between the two. Sheep come, the goats depart. Sheep are blessed by the Father, the goats are simply cursed. The sheep inherit the kingdom, the goats just depart. The kingdom is prepared for the sheep. Eternal punishment is prepared for the devil and his angels. From this passage, it is clear that heaven is for people, hell is for devils. The only reason people end up in hell is that insanely they follow the devil to his fate. Hell is not for people. It is the greatest tragedy in the world that people end up there, but they do end up there. And so Christ warns us. It's important to notice this asymmetrical nature of the blessing and cursing. The Father personally blesses the sheep, the goats simply are cursed. And standing in between them is Jesus. He defines the future. Eternity pivots on Christ. It is coming to or departing from him that carries eternal significance. Before we examine the characteristics of the sheep and the goats, let's notice one more thing about them. They are sheep and goats before Jesus describes any of their actions. They are on the right and the left before he points to any of their deeds. Their actions merely demonstrate their nature. There is nothing that the sheep or goats did in order to become sheep or goats. Indeed, both the sheep and the goats were entirely unaware of what they were doing or failing to do. Neither grouping acted to become sheep or goats. They simply couldn't help acting as sheep and goats. So what are these groups like? Well, the sheep feed, shelter, heal, and comfort the weak. These sheep are very much like their shepherd. Yet Jesus does not say that they did it like me, or even for the sake of me. He says they did it to me. According to Jesus, he is hidden in the least of them. Acts of Christ-like mercy directed to the family of Jesus are kindnesses that Christ himself experiences. They are kindnesses to Christ. It's a wonderful thought that the smallest act of mercy, an act that we might long ago have forgotten, that is remembered by Jesus, the judge. On the other hand, the goats are characterized by their callous indifference. They don't do all things. They just don't do the things that the sheep do. But fascinatingly, they get very defensive when this is pointed out. In verse 44, they say, "When did we not help you, Jesus?" Here is perhaps the most striking difference between the sheep and the goats. The sheep can't remember when they did any good, and the goats can't remember when they didn't do any good, when they did not do any good. The sheep are entirely forgetful of the works that they have performed. It's the goats that are mindful of their deeds, and they are indignant that they should be found wanting there. The sheep have found righteousness in their shepherd, and they unthinkingly express it to others. The goats assert their righteousness to the shepherd, but they are unthinking towards his people. These works of the sheep and the goats, they're not a program of works laid out so that we can become sheep. Jesus is not saying, do the deeds of a sheep and you'll earn eternal life. True sheep don't care about earning anything. They just act like sheep. And how do sheep act? Like their shepherd. Sheep stoop like the great shepherd stooped. We serve like he served. We care like he cared. This is the life of the eternal kingdom, and we get to live it even now. As we do, we find that Christ is not merely our example, he is the recipient of our mercy. Do you want to see the face of your Lord? Look around you to the least and the last and the lost. There he is, hidden in them, waiting for you to do him good. Do you want to serve Jesus? Look to the vulnerable and the weak around you. Serve them, and know that in serving them, you serve Christ himself.